Order, order. We'll start with questions to Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Alex Baker.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll answer questions 1 and 4 together. I'm pleased to report that both access to general practice and patient satisfaction with general practice has improved since Labour came to office. Yay. Over 75% of patients find it easy to contact their practice, an improvement of 14 percentage points since the general election. Not only have we recruited an extra 2,500 GPs, crucially, more patients are receiving continuity of care. Backed by an additional £1.1 billion, lots done, lots to do, and certainly a long way to go, but general practice is on the road to recovery.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to see this government's improvements to GP services making a real difference locally, with over 2,000 more GPs hired and new investment already reaching practices like Jenner House Surgery in Farnborough. However, many of my older and more vulnerable constituents still tell me they're struggling to get through on GP phone lines, especially as more practices move online. What steps is the Secretary of State taking to ensure phone lines remain accessible to those who rely on them so that everyone benefits from our NHS health plan?
So, State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you couldn't script it. We've got a doctor in the House whose phone was alive as this very issue was raised by my honourable friend. Such is the commitment of doctors in our NHS to be available to patients wherever and whenever they are needed. This Labour government was elected on a pledge to end the 8 a.m. scramble, and that is exactly what we're doing. We know that not everyone wants to contact their practice online. That's why practices must offer patients the option to telephone or visit in person in addition to online access. But I do want to thank GPs up and down the country for the work they're doing, the progress we're making in improving online access, improving access generally, and improving patient satisfaction. Lots done, lots to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Buckinghamshire, the number of qualified GPs has risen by 8% in the last year, thanks to this government's determination to recruit and retain more GPs. It's a great start, but I still hear from too many people in Aylesbury who can't get through to their GP surgery or can't get a quick enough appointment when they do. My constituent Jane, whose husband had suffered a stroke, was advised he needed a GP appointment the next day, but it took her a month to get it. I know my right honourable friend is determined to keep improving access to primary care for people in Aylesbury and across the country, so can he set out his next steps?
So, State.
I certainly can. And can I just say to my honourable friend, I'm sorry her constituent was let down. Everyone who needs a same-day appointment should be able to book one, and that's what we're working towards. As she says, we are recruiting more GPs. We're also investing £102 million to create additional space for appointments, including in 21 GP practices in my honourable friend's local ICB system. But nowhere is the state of the NHS and the crumbling legacy we inherited more evident than in the NHS estate, and that's why I'm proud that in her budget the Chancellor will be setting out plans to roll out a new generation of neighbourhood health centres to deal with the crumbling NHS we inherited and to build an NHS fit for the future.
Can't be possible, we've not had the budget yet. Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of exciting opportunities for extended GP premises in my constituency. Places like Martinstoke in Battle, Little Common in Old Town and Oldwood in Robertsbridge. One of the major challenges is the rates that the NHS district valuer is willing to offer for construction sites. It just has not kept up with construction inflation that we've seen across all sectors of construction. I did have a meeting with the Primary Care Minister previously. It was very helpful to kind of start discussions, but we haven't really made the progress that we need to. Can we have a further meeting and can the Secretary of State outline what he's going to do to make sure district valuers are offering rates that can allow constructions to go ahead?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for raising some of the practical challenges that stand in our way to improving and expanding the primary care estate. We are looking into the issues that he raised, and we want to make sure that we can modernise the estate as effectively and quickly as possible. And no doubt when there is progress to report, my honourable friend will be in touch.
Lisa Small.
Mr. Speaker, over the summer, my team and I conducted a health survey across my constituency, and 40% of those living in the most deprived and the most urban parts of my patch, Heatherley, Littlemore, Greatmore, were really struggling to access GPs. What more can the Secretary of State do to ensure that urban and deprived communities get their fair share of GP access?
I'm grateful to the honourable member for her question, and I'm sure her constituents will have noticed what an assiduous and active Member of Parliament she's been, actively soliciting their views. I hope that they and she will find it reassuring to know that we are taking action to deal with the very inequalities she raised. The Royal College of GP found that in the poorest parts of the country there are an extra 300 patients per GP, and it cannot be right that the poorest parts of the country receive the poorest services too. That's why we are reforming the Carhill formula so that deprivation is a driver of funding and prioritisation, and that will help us to improve services for everyone, but also to tackle the gross health inequalities that blight our society.
Ms Twist.
Question 2, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, too many people are waiting too long for mental health support. Since coming to office, this government has put mental health services on the road to recovery. We promised 8,500 more mental health staff by the end of the Parliament. We've already recruited 6,500. We're introducing the first 24/7 mental health crisis support services through NHS 111, and we have rolled out mental health support to schools and colleges across the country, providing help to 5 million children and young people.
Ms Twist.
After 14 years of Conservative government, our mental health system is still suffering from the strain. Rethink Mental Illness. Rethink Mental Illness have reported that there are now 12 times as many people waiting for mental health treatment than for physical health. Nearly 1/3 of people surveyed attempted suicide whilst waiting, while 1 in 5 lost their job. Can the Minister tell me what this government is doing to tackle those long waits and to offer support to people before they reach crisis point?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, can I start by thanking my honourable friend for all the tireless work that she does to improve the lives of people living with mental illness and to prevent suicide. Mr Speaker, the 10-year health plan is going to build on the work already done to reduce waiting lists, including an extra £688 million of real terms investment this year, hiring more staff and expanding talking therapies for an extra 380,000 patients. In addition, she will know that the mental health bill to modernise legislation is also in its final parliamentary stages and will make a significant impact on the lives of those living with mental illness.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My APPG on eating disorder recently published a report on preventing eating disorder-related death, which highlighted that eating disorders are not accurately recorded on death certificates. I was promised an update from the Minister for Women's Health and Mental Health over 2 months ago, but I'm yet waiting to receive it. How much longer do I have to wait?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm genuinely sorry the Honourable Lady has not received the reply that she is entitled to. I will look into this myself and take it up with my ministerial colleague and ensure that her reply is expedited in the fashion that should have been in the first place.
Thomas.
Number 3, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thanks to our investment and modernisation of the NHS, the Government is putting cancer services on the road to recovery by opening up CDCs on evenings and weekends, building new surgical hubs and investing in new radiotherapy machines. We're diagnosing cancer faster and treating it sooner. And this year, an extra 193,000 patients received a timely diagnosis or the all clear compared to the previous year. And pleased to report that cancer services in North West London rank amongst the best performing in England, and we're committed to further improvement.
My honourable friend for that answer. Northwick Park Hospital is the acute hospital that serves my constituents, and it benefits from having excellent cancer clinicians there. They are determined to go even further to improve the speed of diagnosis and the quality of support for those diagnosed with cancer, and are developing plans for a cancer centre at Northwick Park Hospital. So I wondered if my honourable friend would be willing, as part of the rollout of the National Cancer Plan, to come and visit and meet with those clinicians, and perhaps to bring the Secretary of State's chequebook along with her.
Minister.
As my kids would say, that's a bit boomer, Mr Speaker, but I take the point. I mean, the honourable member is a tireless campaigner for Northwick Park and serving his constituents, a long campaigner for improving cancer services. Any reconfiguration, changes to services do need to be clinically led by local decision makers following improvement with patients and stakeholders, and I'm sure my honourable friend will be very happy to meet with him as she's developing the cancer plan to look at services in his constituency.
Speaker, Mount Vernon Hospital is obviously a cancer specialist hospital in North West London as well. But given the recent closure of the Mount Vernon Urgent Care Centre and the delay to the new Watford General Hospital until at least 2032, both of which I previously raised in the Chamber, uncertainties regarding the future of Hemel Hempstead Hospital now looks set to further restrict access to vital healthcare services for my constituents. Will the Health Secretary, will the Minister tell me what steps she is taking to ensure that my constituents receive the adequate access to healthcare they deserve?
Presumably at this particular hospital.
Mount Vernon's next door.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. And as the question alludes to, it's about services across North West London and the ICB. Clearly, we are working with all ICBs to make sure that they in turn work with local members of Parliament about service configuration. Is a matter for them to determine. I have spoken to the honourable gentleman previously. We are determined to make sure that we have the best services for people in their local populations based on clinical need. Today, I've been talking about neighbourhood health services, for example. So as we develop the health service plan, as we put right the mistakes of the past in getting the new hospital programme onto a sustainable footing, all of this will be considered in the round. I'm very happy to keep talking with the honourable gentleman.
Question
5, Speaker.
Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In England, for the first time in 15 years, waiting lists are falling. Through record investment and modernisation, we've cut backlogs by more than 230,000, and we smashed our target for additional appointments in our first year, delivering more than 5 million. There's a long way to go, but the NHS in England is on the road to recovery. Unfortunately, in Scotland, the SNP can't seem to get the car started.
Let's do it.
Mr Speaker, while the NHS is on the road to recovery in England, thanks to the investment of this Labour government, there are 61,000 patients in NHS Ayrshire and Arran on a waiting list for treatment, almost 11,000 of these currently over 1 year. Would the Minister agree with me that, after record levels of funding for Scotland in the last budget, people in my constituency should be asking the First Minister and his government, where's the money gone, John?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. More patients are waiting a year for treatment in Scotland than the entire southwest of England. And thanks to just in Ayrshire and Arran, excuse me, it's that shocking. More patients waiting a year for treatment there than the entire southwest of England. And thanks to the investment the Chancellor has made, Scotland has received an extra £1.5 billion this year and £3.4 billion next year, the biggest funding increase since devolution. Labour is cutting waiting lists in England. Labour is cutting waiting lists in Wales. Why is the SNP failing where Labour is succeeding?
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has failed to end industrial action like he said he would. How is that helping reduce waiting lists?
Mr. Speaker, industrial action sets back our progress on waiting lists, but frankly, given the absolute mess that they presided over, and not just over the course of 14 years where waiting lists rose every single year during the Conservatives' time in power, but also their catastrophic mishandling of industrial relations. We came in, we settled with the BMA with a 20...
Order. Mr Fox, you were the last voice I heard. I want to hear what the Secretary of State's got to hear. If you don't want to, you can go and get a cup of tea with pleasure. Come on.
Mr Speaker, we came in, we settled with the resident doctors with a 28.9% pay rise. And it should be clear to them, from the questions opposite and the extent to which they have opposed a pay rise for not just resident doctors but for NHS staff more generally, there is not a more pro-NHS, pro-doctor, health secretary or government waiting in the wings. It's either the Conservative Party that lumbered the NHS in this crisis in the first place, or the Reform Party that don't believe in the NHS at all.
Does Caroline Johnson, Shadow Minister?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I'd first like to say I'm sorry that the Minister for Public Health and Prevention is unwell and would like to convey to her the best wishes of this side of the House. Mr Speaker, I'd like the Secretary of State to consider a patient who's waited a year for a procedure. Then after 3 waiting list validation calls, agrees finally to see the consultant to check that the procedure is still necessary. If the consultant agrees that it is, do the government figures show that patient is waiting for a year or a much shorter period?
Mr Speaker, a clock stop would be in place from the moment the patient saw the consultant. And the reason why we've had to do waiting list validation is because in addition to driving waiting lists up, the party opposite provided over a total shambles where patients were often waiting in duplicate slots on the waiting list, patients were often removed from waiting lists unnecessarily, or patients were also waiting far too long. That is the mess we inherited from the party opposite. It's no use shadow ministers heckling from the sidelines. When they had the chance, they drove waiting lists up and they drove the NHS into the abyss.
He doesn't seem entirely sure, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps he can write to us with an answer. Well, as someone on the waiting list myself, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that he is correct. The waiting list for procedures and operations requiring day cates or overnight admission are both rising and higher than they were a year ago. Orthopaedic surgery waiting lists are up, yet this government scrapped our major condition strategy and say they've no plans for a musculoskeletal condition framework. Gynecology surgery waiting lists are up, yet the government scrapped and are now reviewing the women's health strategy. Wait for procedures and operations in ophthalmology, general surgery, urology and gastroenterology are going up too. When is he going to grip the surgical waiting lists?
Yes, exactly.
I honestly, Mr. Speaker, cannot believe the brass neck of the Conservative Party that led to the longest waiting times and lowest patient satisfaction in the history of the National Health Service. The best news I can offer the Shadow Minister and others like her waiting on a waiting list is that we have a Labour government that is reducing waiting lists for the first time in more than 15 years.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we inherited a crumbling NHS estate and many hospitals, including Doncaster Royal Infirmary, in a state of despair, thanks again to that shocking record of the last 14 years. When I visited Doncaster Royal Hospital, I saw firsthand the outstanding care staff are providing despite significant infrastructure challenges, and that's why the government supported Doncaster and Basild's Trust with £19.8 million in national funding to redevelop the critical care unit and another £3.2 million from the Estate Safety Fund for fire safety works. We've also provided 9 years of certainty for maintenance budgets, allowing Trust to plan strategic and deliver further improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Minister outlined, Doncaster was badly let down under the previous administration when, after much fanfare and promise, we were left off the new hospital programme. Since then, the Trust have been working on revised capital projects to keep it going in the interim period, including the much-needed rebuild of the East Block. So will the Minister continue to work with me and the Trust to deal with the critical state of DRI?
Yeah, she has been the most tireless campaigner on this issue since coming here in July 2024. So, of course, I will continue to work with her to support her local hospital. The previous government neglected the NHS. Those buildings were left to crumble. The new hospital programme that was neither affordable nor deliverable, and we are committed to reversing this decline and repairing hospitals like Doncaster Royal Infirmary. And that's why the Trust will receive over £105 million in operational capital across the next 4 years to be allocated to those local priorities, including repairs at Doncaster Royal Infirmary, and of course I will continue to work with her.
Dr Neil Hudson.
Number 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Excellent. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In January, we published what is an honest, a realistic and a deliverable plan which put the programme on a sustainable footing, ensuring taxpayers get the maximum value for money. We're committed to delivering all the schemes and are moving at pace with funding in place for design work, construction and business case development. And outside the new hospital programme, we are investing £30 billion in day-to-day maintenance repair of the NHS estate across this spending review period.
I think the Group Minister.
7 and 22, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thanks. Dr Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my constituency neighbour, the Health Secretary will know both his constituents and mine rely heavily on the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow and Whipps Cross in Leytonstone. Now, before the election, he promised the rebuild of Princess Alexandra and he supported the Whipps Won't Wait campaign. Yet under Labour, it appears both Princess Alexandra and Whipps must wait. Whipps Cross now faces an estimated £170 million in backlog maintenance, one of the highest figures in the country. Does the Health Secretary agree with me that rising maintenance costs must be taken into account when prioritising the new hospital programme?
Minister.
Again, I mean, it is really quite astonishing. And the honourable member, like everybody else, knows that there was no money allocated to the new hospital programme beyond what is now last March. They know that. They need to start being honest with their constituents. We finally put...
Sorry. Dr Mullen, I want better examples coming and I expect better from him, please, Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I think their constituents know exactly what their promises were built on sand. That's why there's very few of them, and that's why there's a lot of us over here. And that is why we took hold of the programme, put it on a sustainable and credible footing, and we will deliver it.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Frimley Park Hospital in Wave 1 of the new hospital building programme, with construction expected to start 2028-2029. Many of my constituents use this hospital and are rightly concerned about possible delays to Frimley's build, especially with the RAC issue. Patients and staff cannot be expected to work in an unsafe environment longer than necessary, if at all. Can the Minister reassure my constituents and confirm that the construction of Frimley Park Hospital will begin no later than 2029?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman. He's an assiduous campaigner on behalf of his own Berkshire and now Frimley Park as well. I met with members of Parliament last week involved in the WAVE, the RAC schemes that are progressing to plan. We're absolutely on target with progressing that plan. We look forward to the proposals coming through from the local ICB.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my constituents in Ribble Valley have been directly impacted by the delays to the new hospital programme, with the rebuilding of Preston Hospital being put back almost a decade. And then just last week, I received the disappointing news that Longridge Community Hospital, much loved and valued by local residents, will be closed for safety upgrades for the next 6 months. This government's impressive 10-year house plan rightly notes that this government expects a shift from hospital to community. So with that in mind, can the Minister confirm that he expects integrated care boards, such as Lancashire and South Cumbria ICB, to keep community hospitals open, as opposed to centralising, which not only takes services away from communities, but in our case transfers them to vastly inferior hospital buildings? And will he join with me and the residents of Longridge to say he hopes that essential repairs are completed quickly at Longridge Community Hospital?
Well, I congratulate her for a lot of estates questions into that one point. And the point is, isn't it, that local people value these local facilities that they've known for a very long time? That is why we're committed to reversing the decline in capital investment under the last government. The shocking figure that Lord Darcy outlined, a £40 billion black hole on capital. And part of our move towards neighbourhood health services is exactly that, to get services closer to people's homes as part of our neighbourhood services. And we look forward to having further conversations with her and her constituents.
Bill Estes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Rowan View Mental Health Hospital at McGull Health Park in my constituency is benefiting from with lower costs from the installation of GB Energy's solar panels. But can I encourage the Minister to support McGull Health Park's bid for an innovation and research facility so we can address the government's priority to give equal parity of esteem to both mental and physical health?
Minister.
He makes an excellent point about the working across government with GB Energy to support the local health systems with reducing health costs. That is an important part of our efficiency drive for them. He's a strong advocate for that local McGull Centre facility, and we're absolutely committed to working with the ICB so that they develop the most efficient services for their local populations where people actually are located, rather than expecting people to go to and fro and get bounced around the health system. And I hope that he can see further progress on that issue.
Dr Luke Evans, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When it comes to hospital provision, this side of the House believe that we should continue to use private providers to improve access and reduce waiting times, because we believe the government should not let spare capacity go to waste on ideological grounds. We should continue to make the use of private sector capacity to treat NHS patients where available. Does the Minister agree?
Minister.
I'm sure this is leading somewhere else, but broadly, yes, I think I do.
Dr Luke Evans.
I'm pleased to hear that she does, given it's her current policy. Now, the last time the government brought in a private finance, they brought in PFI, which did bring in £13 billion worth of investment. The problem is it cost a whopping £80 billion to the taxpayer, and hospitals are still paying decades on. So this time round, can the government give a cast iron guarantee and complete confidence to the public this isn't Labour's version of PFI Mark II?
Minister.
Yes, I can give him that guarantee. The last government could have learnt the lessons of some of those PFI schemes that were very costly and didn't run. And why did they learn those lessons? Why didn't they take action to reverse some of that decline? Why didn't they take control of the system and do something about it? We have learnt the lessons from those schemes, thanks in part to the great work done by parliamentarians on committees like Public Accounts Committee. We have learnt those lessons. The new system to build the new neighbourhood health centres, which are fundamental to our drive to shift care out of hospital, will be different, and they will be publicly owned. They will revert to the public. They are fundamentally different. I'm very happy to talk about it in more detail.
So stay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first of all commend my honourable friend for not just leading the recent International Men's Day debate, but also for his courage in speaking so openly about his own experience of sexual assault and the need to tackle the stigma surrounding it. For too long, men's health has been overlooked, with a reluctance to accept that men suffer specific inequalities and hardships as men and boys. We know men are less likely to come forward for healthcare, so from partnering with the Premier League to rolling out health support in the workplace, we're meeting men and boys where they are and supporting them to live longer, healthier lives.
Josh Jubilee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his response. The publication of the first ever men's health strategy for England was a historic step forward, including the drive to improve care for men with prostate cancer, the most common form of cancer in men under 50. And I'd like, Mr. Speaker, to place on record my admiration for the Right Honourable Lord Cameron for speaking publicly about his diagnosis and successful treatment. The commitment to expanding home-based testing and remote monitoring is very welcome, but could the Secretary of State tell the House what the Department will do to increase awareness and access to testing amongst the men most at risk, including those under 50?
Again, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question. I join him in commending Lord Cameron for his openness, because raising awareness, as we know, does encourage men to come forward and does lead to more diagnoses. So he has done a great public service in talking about his own experience. We are improving care for men diagnosed with prostate cancer and undergoing active monitoring or treatment. We'll be introducing support to individuals who are on prostate cancer active monitoring pathways to enable them to order and complete PSA blood tests at home from 2027. And as for screening and the case that's being made for targeted screening, I await the recommendations of the National Screening Committee. We'll study those carefully. We know this is contested within the sector, so it's important that we have an evidence-based discussion, thrash out the arguments and reach the right way forward.
Gregory Camp.
On the issue of screening in relation to prostate cancer, I welcome the Secretary of State's indication of awaiting the outcome of that report. If that report recommends, as many of us hope it does, will he act quickly to develop whatever the recommendations are contained in the report?
I'm very grateful to the honourable member for his question. We're expecting the draft recommendation. There's a 3-month consultation period that follows, but I do want to act quickly on the evidence and what the recommendations contain, not least because we know, as well as being a prevalent form of cancer, there's also some groups, particularly black men, men with a family history of prostate cancer and men with BRCA gene mutations who are at higher risk, where black men are twice as likely to die with prostate cancer than white men. So there is an imperative to act. Whatever the recommendation, we need to do much better on diagnosis and treatment of this terrible condition.
Goldsborough.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. NHS dentistry is out of reach for too many people, an issue that is felt particularly acutely in rural areas like Norfolk. This government is rolling out extra urgent dental appointments available across the country, and we will be making further improvements for patients to come in from April 2026. NHS dentistry was left to rot for 14 years under the party opposite. Labour is putting it on the road to recovery.
Ben Goldsborough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. After 16 months of a Labour government, the share of adults in Norfolk seen by a dentist has risen from barely scraping 30% to well over 40%. Lots done, but lots more to be done after that. But there's something I'd like to raise with the Minister. The University of East Anglia proposed a dental school is part of the solution. Will the Minister work with the Department for Education colleagues to ensure the Office for Students and other bodies give it the green light?
Minister.
I thank him, and I'm absolutely delighted as well that more patients are able to see a dentist in Norfolk. And as my honourable friend says, there's a long way to go. We're certainly not complacent, but we are showing that it's possible to turn things around. I'm also very pleased that the University of East Anglia has been approved as a dental school by the General Dental Council. The Office for Students has statutory responsibility for allocating dental school places, but I fully agree that UEA would be a good candidate for any additional government-funded places allocated in future.
As it's a Norfolk question, James Wilde.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Minister told the Health Select Committee that the spending envelope for dentistry would be confirmed by the end of the summer at the latest. Is the Office for Students still waiting for a ministerial direction to launch that competition for new places so that UEA can bid along with others and that we can get training places in Norfolk for the first time?
Well, I thank him for that question. He's right that it is the responsibility of the government to give a steer to the Office for Students. We are very close to being able to put that together. I'm expecting some advice from my officials later this week, and I'd be very happy to keep him updated on further progress.
For this government. Since I last took questions in this House, we've extended the NHS health check to include menopause for the first time, following the brilliant campaigning by Menopause Mandate, among others. We've also made the morning after pill free in pharmacies. The Prime Minister is convening work across governments to tackle violence against women and girls, where the health and care services in our country will play our part in protecting and supporting victims. And in addition, I've asked the government's Women's Health Ambassador to renew the women's health strategy put in place by the previous government so that we can make sure it's driving the right progress going forward.
Josh Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When my constituent Rachel attended multiple A&E departments with severe abdominal pain, swelling, fever and nausea, her fears of a ruptured ovarian cyst were repeatedly dismissed. In her day-to-day life, Rachel is a professional advising on antimicrobial resistance around the world, but as a patient, she felt that her concerns were ignored and she was pushed aside. Rachel is determined to use her experience to challenge the unacceptable medical misogyny that she and women across the UK too often still face. So could the Minister set out what action the government is taking to ensure women are not left to endure painful reproductive health conditions? And would the Secretary of State agree to meet with Rachel to hear her story firsthand?
Well done. So State.
Can I thank my honourable friend for raising Rachel's experience? We have put in place Jess's rule, and we're rolling out Martha's rule, so that whether it's in primary care or in acute care, patient voices are heard, and health professionals and patients be given the power to make sure that health professionals are listening and responding appropriately. But my honourable friend is right to acknowledge that so much of this arises from medical misogyny. And it's not just a case of changing rules and regulations, it's a case of changing culture and practice so that women aren't just seen, they are also heard and listened to. And that is the fundamental problem that we are determined to address. And of course, I'd be delighted to meet Rachel to hear her experience firsthand.
Chair of the Select Committee, Leyland Brown.
Mr. Speaker, diethylstilbestrol, or DES, was prescribed to women until the 80s to treat miscarriage. Those who took it were themselves at a greater risk of breast cancer, and their daughters have a higher risk of rare cervical cancers. It's estimated that a whopping 300,000 women have been affected. Now, 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of State made an apology to victims, but they rightly want more than sorry, and they point out that the screening programme is insufficient. So will the Secretary of State meet with me, campaigners and victims to understand how this was allowed to happen, who is going to be held accountable, and how they can go about getting compensation for this egregious scandal?
Can I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for raising this extremely serious issue, and I'm glad she's drawn to the House's attention that I have apologised on behalf of the state for the failure that occurred and for the harm that has arisen as a result. My honourable friend, the member for Bournemouth East West has been campaigning diligently on this, and the DES Justice UK campaign has done a magnificent job raising public awareness. I'm always delighted to meet the Chair of the Select Committee because I know where my bread's buttered, but on this particular issue I'd be delighted to do so in particular.
Helen Morgan, Liberal Democrats.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Health inequalities impacting women at their most stark when it comes to maternity care, with many NHS trusts requiring improvement, and Black and Asian women and those from the most deprived communities far more likely to suffer a worse outcome or even lose their baby. The Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists and the Royal College of Midwives have vocally opposed the removal of the ring fence from the Service Delivery Fund, saying that funding provided to drive change following the Ockenden Review has disappeared at the stroke of a pen. So will the Secretary of State commit to reinstating that ring fence and ensuring that all of the immediate and essential actions arising from the Ockenden review into the failings at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital Trust are implemented as soon as possible?
Can I thank the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for her question? She's right to raise the inequalities at the heart of poor maternity care, as well as failures in services overall. There are a number of actions we're taking, but on this issue of funding specifically, because I think this will become a kind of recurrent theme across a range of issues during this Parliament, the approach we are taking as a government is to try and devolve more power, more responsibility and resources closer to the front line, indeed at the front line. As we do so, we are removing national ring fences. I appreciate what she says about the risk, and it's important that we, and no doubt Parliament, scrutinise to make sure that outcomes across the board improve and that the focus that this House wants to bring to issues like maternity safety is delivered in practice. But I do think we're right to drive at the issue of devolution. I do think decisions are better taken within communities, close to communities and at a more local system level. But she's right to be vigilant about this, and we are absolutely open to challenge on this side of the House if systems are not acting in the way that we want, and if this is having adverse impact, we will reconsider.
Cat Smith.
Question 11.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, we are carefully considering the work undertaken by the Patient Safety Commissioner, which sets out various potential options for redress. Speaking as both a clinician and as a minister that has recently taken on this area, my honourable friend will know this is highly complex work, but it is a complexity I am willing to step into, and it requires input and planning across government, which takes time. I am certainly committed to taking this issue seriously and will return to update her and the House in due course.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the new Minister to his post, and this is an issue I've been campaigning on, Mr Speaker, for 10 years, and I have got a stack of letters, written parliamentary questions which say things like in due course and the government is considering. And for a group of people who have been gaslit by the medical profession, will the Minister step up and be the Minister who ensures that these families who are victims of the sodium valproate scandal actually see the redress that they absolutely deserve and make sure that they get a meeting with him at the earliest opportunity that he has?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, can I take this opportunity to thank my honourable friend for all the tireless work and campaigning and advocacy she has been doing on this issue for many, many years, particularly since the report was published in February 2024. She will be sensitive to, I am certainly sensitive to, the fact that we're coming up to the 2-year anniversary of that report. It is a call to action for me and the department to answer the questions that she's been asking so long for. I'll be meeting with the Patient Safety Commissioner very shortly, and I'm very happy to meet her separately when she wishes.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Minister will know that the Hughes report focused very much on England, but those affected under the redress scheme will be across the entirety of the United Kingdom. Will the Minister ensure that he engages with health ministers from the devolved authorities?
Minister.
Very grateful, Mr Speaker, for the honourable gentleman's question. He can certainly be given that assurance from me as the Minister also responsible for foreign nation engagement. The Hughes report is a combination of the sodium valproate issues and those of pelvic mesh, and I know these resonate across the four nations, particularly when it comes to licensing and regulation of medical technology. So he has that assurance from me.
Griffith.
Question 12, please, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Trade unions representing the majority of NHS staff are engaged in constructive dialogue with the government, particularly around reform of Agenda for Change. All NHS staff have received above-inflation pay rises. No other staff in the public sector have received a pay rise as high as resident doctors. We offered extra jobs, prioritisation for UK graduates and help with out-of-pocket expenses. So against that backdrop, it is simply appalling that BMA leaders led their members out on strike, even though a majority of resident doctors supported the government's offer. And I'm pleased to report to the House, Mr Speaker, that thanks to NHS leaders and frontline staff, including resident doctors who turned up, the NHS met its ambitious goal and 95% of planned elective activity went ahead, meaning 850,000 patients got the procedures and operations they needed despite the BMA's reckless action. Nonetheless, the time and money this has cost us is detrimental, and I hope the BMA will come back to the table constructively now.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
After warnings from the NHS Confederation and NHS providers, my constituents are still rightly concerned that services may yet be cut, appointments lost and operations delayed as a direct result of the BMA's industrial action. But these strikes didn't need to happen. So what will the Secretary of State do to reassure patients in Bognor Regis and Littlehampton that their safety and well-being is a priority for this government, which has no timetable, no plan, and has made no progress towards ending these damaging rolling strikes?
Mr. Speaker, I must say there is a bout of collective amnesia that has swept the opposition benches, because they seem to have forgotten the absolute calamity they presided over in terms of bad industrial relations. The difference between this side of the House and the Conservative Party is we have never closed the door to talks. We've always been willing to engage with resident doctors in good faith, and unlike the party opposite, they've received a 28.9% pay rise from this Labour government. A reminder to resident doctors across the land that the grass is not greener on the other side, and they should work with a Labour government that wants to work with them.
Question number 13, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I am delighted to have announced in a written ministerial statement yesterday that the government is developing a palliative care and end-of-life care modern service framework for England. The modern service framework will be aligned with the 10-year health plan, prioritising shifting care out of hospitals and into the community to ensure personalised, compassionate support for individuals and their families.
Sorry, Member Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there has been cross-party and cross-charity campaigning for this strategy, so I welcome that the Minister has announced this. Yeah. But hospices across the country, and especially in my constituency, are telling me that the biggest problem they have is the national insurance rise. For example, a children's hospice that covers my constituency tells me the £90,000 extra they have to pay in national insurance could have funded 3 nurses. Yeah. So can I ask the Minister what discussions he's had with the Chancellor ahead of tomorrow's budget to ensure that hospices and indeed other health and social care organisations are exempt from any national insurance rises, either in the past or in the future?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I noticed he didn't welcome the fact that we're supporting the hospice sector with a £100 million capital funding boost and £80 million in revenue funding for children's hospices over 3 years. Now, we also notice the benches opposite do like to welcome the additional investment that was generated from the last budget, but they don't seem to welcome the fact that it was the means that it was generated by. So what I would say to them is, what would they cut or what taxes would they put up in order to pay for what we are doing to get our NHS back on its feet and fit for the future?
Alistair Strathern.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the government's commitment to a strategy that is as overdue as it is important for palliative care, but it will mean nothing for hospices who aren't able to last until it comes into effect. Garden House Hospice in my constituents facing a crucial funding shortfall, and while incredibly welcome capital funding from the government came through earlier this year, they're still just short of the cash flow gap they need to secure their operations. Would the Minister meet with me to see what further work the ICB might be able to do to protect this vital hospice serving my constituents?
Well, I'm very pleased that the measures we've taken have provided financial support. I absolutely recognise the challenging financial position, and I, of course, would be more than happy to meet with him to discuss that further.
Conor.
Mr. Speaker, we are committed to transforming cancer care, already having invested £70 million in new radiotherapy machines, helping patients be treated more quickly. We're investing £26 million in NHS and opening community diagnostic centres at evening weekends to catch cancer early. And our National Cancer Plan will have patients at its heart, from referral to diagnosis to treatment and ongoing care.
My constituent Mike lost his wife to cancer, but as well as battling the physical symptoms, she also faced devastating mental health effects, becoming deeply depressed after her terminal diagnosis. But despite this, she never received appropriate mental health support, and this is a significant issue for cancer patients, and one which should be addressed as part of our welcome reforms to palliative care. So could the relevant minister meet with me and Mike to discuss his campaign to improve mental health support for those with a terminal diagnosis?
Minister.
Well, of course, I'm sorry to hear about the loss of his constituent's wife, and our thoughts are with him and his family. We are supporting, it raises an excellent point, we are supporting people with cancer experiencing poor mental health care by expanding access to psychological therapies through NHS talking therapies. And I'm sure my honourable friend will be happy to talk with him further as she develops her cancer plan to make sure these issues are incorporated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituent recently had successful high-intensity focused ultrasound treatment for prostate cancer at Charing Cross Hospital because it's not even offered to men at Portsmouth hospitals, despite being a less invasive treatment with fewer long-term health implications. Now, as if to underline the inequality, Mr. Speaker, imagine his surprise when he turned up at the hospital and found that it was the same doctor that had diagnosed him in Portsmouth was actually carrying out the procedure in London. So I asked the Minister, what more are they doing to ensure that there is no postcode lottery when it comes to HIFU, and what the Minister will do to ensure more men get access to it?
Well, can Minister. I thank her for that question and her work on this issue. And she raises a really important issue about consistency of care. We understand that services are different in different parts of the country, that sometimes the needs are, but not when there is proven evidence. We want to make sure that where there is good practice and proven evidence, that that care is rolled out, as we say, bring the best of the NHS to the rest of the NHS. And I'm sure my honourable friend, as she develops her cancer plan, will take note of that point.
We now come to topical. Cyril.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obesity robs children of the best possible start in life, hits the poorest hardest, sets them up for a lifetime of health problems and costs the NHS billions. So I can announce to the House we're expanding the soft drinks industry levy to include bottles and cartons of milkshakes, flavoured milk and milk substitute drinks. We're also reducing the threshold to 4.5 grams of sugar per 100 millilitres. Mr. Speaker, this government will not look away as children get unhealthier, and our political opponents urge us to leave them behind. Thank you.
The only thing I would say is at least we're hearing it first in this House and on Sky. Sir Olney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the Secretary of State and the Health Department for the launch last week of the Men's Health Strategy. My constituent, Philip Pirrie, who sadly lost his son to suicide, has been calling on the government to launch a public health campaign to reduce the stigma of suicide. Nearly 75% of those who lose their lives to suicide have not been in contact with mental health services, and that's why we need to reach out. So will the Secretary of State meet with myself and my constituent to discuss such a campaign?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure my honourable friend, the Minister, would be delighted to. The Men's Health Strategy sets out precisely the challenge in those terms, and through the partnerships we've already announced with people like the Premier League, as well as the people who've been knocking at our doors to get involved in such a campaign, I'm absolutely confident that together, collectively across the House and across the country, we can tackle this terrible stigma.
Jacob Collier.
Mr. Speaker, it's great news that we're starting to see NHS dentists return to Burton-upon-Trent, but my constituents in Uttoxeter are still without an NHS dentist for adults. For a growing town of over 16,000 people, when can my constituents expect to put a smile on their face?
I thank my honourable friend. He's a tireless campaigner on this issue. We want to see more dentists in Burton and Uttoxeter and across the country. That's why we're offering dentists £20,000 to work in underserved areas. And we're making it a requirement for new dentists to practice in the NHS through our tie-in policy. We're also making additional urgent appointments available across the country, including in my honourable friend's for my honourable friend's constituents in Burton and Uttoxeter.
Show Secretary of State Stuart Andrew, the birthday boy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Secretary of State why he hasn't sorted out the strikes and disputes?
Yeah, quite right.
Secretary of State.
Can I wish the Shadow Health Secretary a very happy birthday, 21 again. It's good to see him here. Mr. Speaker, we continue to hold the door open to the BMA. If they want to engage constructively, we are ready and willing. What we will not do is be held to ransom. What we cannot afford to do is pay more than we already have. What we are able and willing to do is go further to improve their career progression, their job prospects, and to work with them to rebuild the NHS the party opposite broke.
I've got to get through a lot of topicals. Stuart Andrew.
But, Mr. Speaker, the power to stop these strikes is in the government's hands. They need to sit down and negotiate to end the strikes. But ministers are too busy briefing against each other. Not my words, the Secretary of State's words when he was standing here. He said it was so simple. It's the Secretary of State who's embroiled in a leadership battle that's taking over focus on averting walkouts, and the Employment Rights Bill that reduces voting thresholds on strikes and scrapping minimum service levels. So does the Secretary of State accept that things are only going to get worse as a result of the bill? And in his words, does he agree that patients have suffered enough?
But, Mr. Speaker, I was very clear in opposition about the government's responsibility to sit down and negotiate. That's exactly what I've been doing. It takes two to tango. As for the other trivial nonsense he mentions, I've been very clear that I am a faithful, but of course if he were a game show, he'd be pointless.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a higher prevalence of multiple sclerosis in Scotland than there is in any other part of the UK. What steps is the department taking to ensure that with the MS, that people living with MS can access both a timely diagnosis and an equitable specialist care regardless of where they live in the UK?
Minister.
I thank her for that question. It's a very important point that she raises. I'd be more than happy perhaps to meet with her to discuss it, because I think it needs some detail on the complexity of what she's raising.
Morgan, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Every MP will be aware of the huge value that unpaid carers add to the NHS, taking the pressure off for paid carers, often under intolerable pressure. We're therefore really pleased to hear the news this morning that thousands of unpaid carers will have their cases reviewed after they were left with huge debts by failure of the government over a long period of time. But it's been reported that debts will continue to accrue and overpayments will continue to be pursued for as long as a year from now. Given his responsibility to unpaid carers, will the Secretary of State raise this issue with colleagues, urging them to suspend repayments until the recommendations are in force and ensure those people propping up the care system are treated fairly from today, not a year's time?
I'm very grateful to the honourable member for that question. This is a terrible situation, one of many messes this government is now working to clean up. And I will certainly make sure that the issues she raises are taken up with my right honourable friend, the Work and Pension Secretary.
Tristan Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Public Accounts Committee has recently scrutinised the state of clinical negligence in the UK. At £60 billion, the government liability for clinical negligence has increased under the last government significantly. The government has commissioned David Locke to review the issue. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that reform is desperately needed in this space?
Minister.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend's question. He's absolutely right. As announced in the 10-year health plan, David Locke, KC, is providing expert policy advice on the rising legal costs of clinical negligence and how we can improve patients' experience of claims. This review is ongoing, and following initial advice to ministers and the recent NAO report, the results of David Locke's work will inform future policy making in this area, and I'm very happy to update him as soon as this happens.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Reports that 1 in 3 adults have been relying on chatbots and AI tools for mental health advice and therapy are concerning because they're currently unregulated and potentially dangerous. One reason people are using these is because mental health waiting lists are so long. What is the Minister doing to reduce mental health waiting lists so that people can speak to a qualified mental health practitioner instead of relying on unregulated AI tools?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to report to the honourable gentleman we are well on the way to delivering the 8,500 more mental health staff we promised our manifesto, well over 6,500 already there. In terms of digital tools, these can play a role, but I'm pleased to report that in terms of the evolution of our online tools via the NHS app, making sure we have high quality and clinically verified apps will be part of that approach so that people can get access to high quality digital tools, not ones they've Googled on the internet.
Kenneth Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. I commend him for reaffirming his commitment to drive forward digital innovation in the NHS. Does he agree with me that Scotland should mirror the UK so that we do not fall behind the pace in a development that could be game-changing in terms of outcomes for patient and staff alike?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the NHS in Scotland has no app and no plans for national rollout, the NHS in England has had an app since 2019, with 71 million logins in October 2025. 3 in 4 people now have the app in their pockets, and they have more subscribers in England than Netflix. Why, might you ask, Mr. Speaker, does NHS Scotland not have an app? Well, the answer might come in an FOI request by the champion journalist Simon Johnson. When asked about some of the drawbacks of applying an NHS England app in Scotland, they said, political optics of adopting an English solution. Analog John to move over and let Anna Sarwar and Jackie Bailey finally drag the Scottish NHS.
Well, you're on topicals. The Prime Minister's here. If you don't want members to get in, please tell me. It'd be easier. Sarah Dyke.
Speaker, in Somerset, only 41% of children have seen an NHS dentist in the last 2 years, well below the national average. Ben from Somerton is a single parent of 4 children. He lives in an NHS dental desert and worries about the health of his children's teeth because there is no way that he can pay for private dental care, as he can barely afford to pay for his children's food. So ahead of the budget tomorrow, can the Minister confirm what actions he is taking?
I thank her for that question. We have the interim reforms, our response to that being published very, very soon. We are working on the long-term reform of the NHS dentistry contract with the BDA. I'd be happy to keep her updated on our progress.
I'm proud that this government has invested record amounts into our National Health Service, and in Altrincham and Sale West the results are clear. Waiting lists down 10 months in a row, extra investment in local GP surgeries, and most recently a new skin cancer diagnostics centre at Altrincham Hospital, ensuring early intervention at the heart of local health care. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that this is exactly the change we were elected to deliver?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. They don't like to hear it opposite, but we are bringing waiting lists down for the first time in 15 years. Patient satisfaction with general practice is rising, and we're delivering the investment, the modernisation and the change the country voted for.
Pepe Hailing.
2 weeks ago, I asked the government whether it held discussions with Cambridgeshire Integrated Care Board on the 16,000-strong petition to save beds at the Arthur Rank Hospice. I was informed that it will not be possible to provide a response within the usual time period. So I've got a simpler request. Will the Minister meet with me and the new Central East Integrated Care Board to discuss how to identify, need and strategically commission beds?
Yes, happy to meet.
Happy. Peter Swallow.
Mr. Speaker, Bracknell is a life sciences superpower with Eli Lilly, Sandoz and Boehringer Ingelheim all having a footprint in our town. What can we do to speed up clinical trial setup to help deliver the next generation of treatments for our NHS?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Government is already committing to clinical trials being under 150 days by next March, and I commend my honourable friend of all the work he does with his local pharmaceutical companies in advancing medical science locally and nationally.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State will be aware that since the law changed, the number of children who have received NHS prescriptions for severe epilepsy for medical cannabis is pitifully low. Families and campaigners believe that part of the reason for that is that the Home Office still has a large amount of responsibility for these products. Will he meet with me and other interested MPs to discuss whether his department could take more responsibility?
Mr. Speaker, the Government, although has no plans to change departmental responsibilities applicable to unlicensed and cannabis-based products, it is cognisant of the need for research in this area. We have agreed to over £8.5 million in funding for 2 world-first clinical trials to investigate the safety and efficacy of cannabinoid treatments for drug-resistant epilepsy in both adults and children, and I'm happy to speak to him about this further.
Sonia Kumar.
Mr. Speaker, I've seen firsthand how severe MSK conditions such as lower back pain can devastate the ability to work, have relationships, sleep and overall well-being. With over 1 million children's education disrupted by MSK conditions with missed schooling and fragmented, hard-to-navigate services, will the Minister prioritise MSK conditions in Phase 2 of the Modern Service Framework and confirm when that will be published?
Well, could I pay tribute to my honourable friend for saving the Ladies' Walk Health Centre, which the party opposite was trying to shut in her constituency. We are advancing modern service frameworks for those conditions where we can swiftly and significantly raise the quality of care. The National Quality Board makes recommendations on future modern service frameworks, and the NQB's next meeting is on the 8th of December.
Sir Roger Gale.
Mr. Speaker, it's estimated that there are some 200 highly qualified Ukrainian dentists resident in the United Kingdom as refugees. They could be working for the health service. Because of the moribund attitude of the General Dental Council, they're not allowed to do so. Can we try and drag the GDC into at least the 20th century so that these talents can be utilised?
I thank him for that question. I met with the GDC very recently. They have completed the procurement of the new management agent for running the ORE. I'm confident that we're going to see a significant boost in the numbers, and that is coming on stream very quickly. But I agree with him that it's been too slow and it needs to speed up.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency of Hyndburn, about 38% of children are sadly growing up in poverty. This government is committed to ensuring the best start in life for all children. So in addition to the increase in mental health support teams in schools, does the NHS workforce plan currently address the vital need for trained specialist community public nurses in schools?
My honourable friend is absolutely right about the need to improve the quality of the paediatric workforce. We're considering that as we revise the workforce plan, and I'm proud that already, with just one decision we took in the first year of this Labour government to expand free school meals, we'll be lifting 100,000 more children out of the poverty they were left in by the party opposite.
Final question, Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 24-25, the NHS Trust and the Secretary of State's constituency collected £2.4 million from patient and visitor parking and a further £1 million from staff parking. Given these costs fall hardest on the poor and the most seriously ill, will he now consider abolishing this inequitable burden on the sick, their relatives and those who care for them?
Mr. Speaker, if I were him, I'd be more worried about the situation close to home, because under the SNP's abysmal record of failure, whereas waiting lists are falling in Labour-led England and Labour-led Wales, in SNP Scotland they are rising, despite the biggest funding settlement since devolution began, a record that should make him and his party blush.
Point of order, Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that you have been incensed by the unprecedented briefings that we have seen by the government in the run-up to the budget. Despite your clear statements on this, it beggars belief that today they have done it again by announcing the Chancellor will announce £300 million into NHS tech in her budget tomorrow. Not a briefing to journalists, but with an article on the gov.uk website, just a day after a minister stood at that dispatch box and said, "I can assure the honourable member, given the respect that the government paid to this House and to their obligations in it, that if there is an important policy announcement to be made, it will be made to this House." Given that is clearly not the case in this instance, and despite your statements, can you advise what we as members of this House can do?
It's frustrating for me and frustrating for all backbenchers, because everything should be heard here first. The budget should be sacrosanct and only heard on budget day. What I would say is it does make a change for budget speculation to at least come to the chamber. That is quite out of the ordinary at the moment. Look, I thank the honourable member for giving notice of point of order. I have said on a number of occasions in recent weeks the government's own ministerial code states that major announcements should be made in the House in the first instance, not the media. We had urgent questions yesterday on this issue. The Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee has also been conducting an inquiry into ministerial statements and the ministerial code. I look forward to seeing their report earlier rather than later. And I would point out the budget. The country expects the budget to come out on budget day. It does nothing for the city and it does nothing for how people view this chamber. We will leave it there. Right, we now come to the statements. Let the front benches change over. Right, we now come to the first statement. I call the Prime Minister. Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with permission, I'll update the House on my recent international engagements and our work to strengthen the security of our continent and our economy. Starting, Mr. Speaker, with the situation in Ukraine, which of course is at the forefront of all of our minds. Over recent days, I've had detailed discussions with allies. I met the partners of the Coalition of the Willing during the G20, and I've spoken a number of times to both President Trump and President Zelensky, who I spoke to again earlier this morning. Mr. Speaker, we're united in wanting a ceasefire and a permanent end to the horrendous suffering that this war has brought to Ukraine. I have always said our aim must be a just and lasting peace. And both of those words, Mr. Speaker, are important, just and lasting. So, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the continued efforts of the United States to end the war and stop the killing. The initial draft of the 28-point plan included points that were not acceptable, but also some very important elements that will be essential for a just and lasting peace. For example, it sets out steps on security guarantees from the US and partners. This is very significant, and the discussions in Geneva took important steps forward, with progress between the US and Ukraine on an updated peace framework. I can reassure the House that work is ongoing to refine this plan. And Mr. Speaker, we're clear about the fundamental principles here, that Ukraine's sovereignty must be maintained, that Ukraine should be able to defend herself in future, and that matters about Ukraine and its future must be determined by Ukraine. We are clear their voice must always be at the heart of the process, and elements relating to Europe and NATO will need the consent of Europe and NATO members. So there's still a long way to go and a tough road ahead, but we're more committed than ever to this cause and to keeping pushing forward on this process. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, later this afternoon, President Macron, Chancellor Merz and I will convene the Coalition of the Willing, which now has 36 members, to discuss how we can advance the peace process and to discuss how we can continue to keep Ukraine in the fight right now. Because, Mr. Speaker, Ukraine continues to hold the line. They continue to mount a fearless defence of their country. And they deserve not just our respect, but our help and our support. After all, it is not just our values that are at risk here, it's our security too. In addition to targeting energy and food prices, Putin continues to seek to undermine our security, including, Mr. Speaker, by sending Russian ships into our waters. The Royal Navy intercepted 2 Russian ships in our waters in the last 2 weeks. So let me assure the House, we are more ready and determined than ever to protect our territory and protect the British people. As we work towards that end, we will never let up on the support that Ukraine needs, the vital defensive capabilities it needs to protect its people, and the economic pressure that we must continue to mount on Russia to cut off the fuel to their war machine. Mr. Speaker, the urgent need to take Russian oil and gas off the global market was something I discussed extensively at the G20. This is vital, especially now, as winter begins to bite in Ukraine and Putin continues his barbaric attacks on civilians and civilian energy infrastructure. Because, Mr. Speaker, as this House knows, and the British people know, there is only one nation that wants this war, only one nation that launched this illegal invasion, and only one nation that deploys a constant barrage aimed at murdering innocent civilians. We saw that again last night, Mr. Speaker, with Russia's strikes on Kyiv. Indeed, in the last week before last night, Russia launched over 1,200 drones and over 60 cruise and ballistic missiles at Ukraine, killing children like 7-year-old Amelia, a Polish citizen, killed alongside her mother by a Russian missile in Ternopil last Wednesday, an attack that took 34 lives in total. And, Mr. Speaker, last night, as a family, we celebrated my daughter's 15th birthday. Later, I saw images on the news of a young girl about the same age being pulled from the rubble of a building in Ukraine where her mother had just been killed. It's abhorrent. It's beyond belief. Yet Ukraine lives this same story every night in their cities and every day on the front line, where so many Ukrainians are killed fighting for their freedom. And, Mr. Speaker, we should not forget that Putin's aggression, his illegal actions, and his total disregard for human life has taken a huge toll on his own people. Thousands of Russian soldiers are killed every single day. 100,000 have been killed attacking Donetsk. In total, more than 1 million Russians have been killed or injured, all because of the depraved ambitions of one man. So, Mr. Speaker, we say again, this country will never falter in our support for the Ukrainian people. We will maintain a unity of purpose with our allies, and we will focus on delivering the calm, serious leadership that is needed to advance a just and lasting peace for Ukraine and indeed for the whole of Europe. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to my broader discussions at the G20. I took the opportunity in South Africa to raise the ongoing and utterly horrifying situation in Sudan. We are working with our partners to break the restrictions on humanitarian aid and demand accountability. We must rally global pressure to stop the slaughter, achieve a sustained ceasefire, and ultimately to deliver a transition to civilian rule. Mr. Speaker, in South Africa, I also chaired the Global Fund replenishment alongside President Ramaphosa, leading the charge in the global fight against AIDS, TB, and malaria. Work that has already saved over 70 million lives. Yet, Mr. Speaker, malaria still kills a child under the age of 5 nearly every minute. 4,000 adolescent girls and young women still contract HIV every week. And TB remains the world's single deadliest infectious disease, even though we've had a cure for nearly a century. So we will keep driving this project forward because it's the right thing to do and because it helps protect the United Kingdom from future pandemics and health emergencies. Mr. Speaker, a central priority at the G20 was delivering economic security and opportunity, as it is at every international meeting I attend. A strong economy allows us to be strong in the world. Economic security is national security. So, Mr. Speaker, I can tell the House we delivered for the British people this weekend, including deals with South Africa for British firms to upgrade their railways and submarines, a £370 million deal for Rolls-Royce to supply jet engines to Algeria, and a £4 billion deal with Indonesia for new ships, delivering 1,000 jobs in Rosyth, Plymouth and Bristol, and delivering, if I may say, another rebuke to all the people who prematurely wrote off British shipbuilding. Mr. Speaker, we can only achieve these things, we can only deliver for the British people by working with our partners. And I think this is a moment to raise our sights. Mr. Speaker, the House will recall that it was when the global financial crisis struck that the G20 showed its full potential, when my predecessor, Gordon Brown, marshalled a global response to that crisis to protect the savings and finances of the British people. And so, in this moment of growing fragility and crisis around the world, it is time once again to take a more purposeful, unified approach, focused on global growth and stability. I called for a response based on the right balance of investment and fiscal discipline, open markets, reforming the global trading system, and tackling the cost of living crisis. That approach was echoed by the leaders' declaration from Johannesburg. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to say that the summit confirmed that the UK will take on the presidency of the G20 in 2027, the first time it's returned to the UK since 2009. It will be a proud moment for our country, part of our work to restore Britain's international leadership, which was neglected for so long, And we will use that presidency to drive the agenda that I've been talking about today, to drive growth and opportunity, to create jobs, cut the cost of living, and fundamentally strengthen the economic security of the British people. That is what we're doing at home and abroad, and I commend this statement to the House.
Can we note the Leader of the Opposition?
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement? We are proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, and our support remains unwavering. Ukraine is battling the most flagrant breach of territorial integrity in Europe in recent times. We must never forget that this war was started by Putin, who is trying to extinguish a democracy on our own continent. It is important that we stand together to defend the principle that aggressors should not succeed. The previous Conservative government led Europe in support for Ukraine. We were the first country to provide modern Western main battle tanks and to gift munitions and Storm Shadow missiles. We led the way on sanctions and trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers on UK soil. It is now incumbent on this government to leverage British influence at this crucial time for the West. Putin's relentless bombardment of Kyiv and KGB-style negotiating tactics show he is not serious about peace, which is why Russia must not be welcomed back into the international fold without a comprehensive peace agreement. So will the Prime Minister rule out support for readmitting Russia to the G7? We all want this terrible war to end. And as the Prime Minister rightly said, elements of that draft 28-point plan were unacceptable. Conservatives are clear that the blanket surrender of Ukrainian territory would mean rewarding Putin's unprovoked aggression. What is the government's position on reports that Ukraine's territorial integrity is on the table? Because if Putin is seen to emerge stronger from these negotiations, all our potential adversaries will be emboldened. Be in no doubt, Mr. Speaker, the axis of authoritarian states is collaborating to destabilize the West, aided by China, with Iran providing weapons and North Korea providing troops for Putin. It is precisely for these reasons that the government must continue to work extremely closely with the US and to understand their objectives. Parties like the Lib Dems and the Greens, who are encouraging us to decouple from the US, are putting their anti-American prejudice above national security. But, Mr. Speaker, given that in the last fortnight the Royal Navy has intercepted 2 Russian ships in our waters, and with Russian spy ships pointing lasers at RAF pilots, it is a disgrace that Reform are still blaming NATO for Russia's aggression. Although perhaps it should come as no surprise when their former leader in Wales was sent to prison last week for taking bribes from Putin. Earlier this year, Mr. Speaker, many countries came together to form the Coalition of the Willing, pledging to strengthen support for Ukraine. Can the Prime Minister update us on the planning and readiness of the Coalition of the Willing? What is its scope and terms of mission? And what can the Prime Minister tell us about a counter-proposal that is reportedly being submitted by the EU? Mr. Speaker, to stand with Ukraine, we need to know we can also stand on our own 2 feet. Last week, the Commons Defence Select Committee warned that Britain is unprepared for a major attack and the government is making glacial progress towards conflict readiness. So it is concerning that reports indicate the MOD faces a potential budget cut this financial year of £2.6 billion. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether this is true or false? Meanwhile, the EU is reportedly demanding nearly €7 billion for the UK to buy into its defence fund. Conservatives warned that this would happen. At the time the UK-EU reset deal was being negotiated, the Shadow Defence Secretary said that Labour had given away 12 years of British fishing rights in exchange for nothing. He was right. Will the Prime Minister rule out paying the EU for access to SAFE? Mr. Speaker, it is extremely disappointing that Europe is still buying Russian oil and gas. Moscow should be denied safe harbours for its tankers and profits, and Europe should ban Russian oil and gas sooner than its current 2027 deadline. I believe the Prime Minister agrees with that sentiment. So what pressure will he put on European countries to stop them buying Russian oil and gas? Mr. Speaker, the UK's genuinely world-leading support has made a material difference to Ukraine's ability to fight back against Russia's illegal invasion. Support that I will remind the Prime Minister began under the Conservatives. Let's not forget that in 2022, Russia thought it could capture Kyiv and subjugate Ukraine within days. So let's wake up and face that threat from Russia. So finally, can the Prime Minister reassure the House that we will be boosting our own defence capabilities as well as using our influence to ensure that secure future for Ukraine?
Minister.
Well, can I start by thanking her support on Ukraine? I think it is really important that we stay united in this House. And can I readily acknowledge the role of the previous government in leading on Ukraine and, in fact, in bringing the whole House together on this issue, which it did for a number of years and allowed us a platform on which to build the support that we are now putting in place. In relation to membership of the G7, G8, look, the focus at the moment is on a ceasefire, so anything along those lines is a long way off. But, you know, we have to remember that Putin is the aggressor here. He is the one who started this war. On territorial integrity, the sovereignty of Ukraine is paramount, and that's why any questions about the future of Ukraine must be determined by Ukraine, and that is why I've been speaking frequently to both President Trump and President Zelensky. President Zelensky probably 5 or 6 times in the last 2 or 3 days on a whole range of issues. Can I join her in her comments about reform, because it is shocking that a senior official, the leader in Wales, has been jailed for over 10 years, a very significant sentence, for pro-Russia bribes. That is extraordinary. And that is why I say, and I say again, there should be that the reform leadership should have the courage to launch an investigation. How on earth did that happen in their party? And what other links are there? But today, and this statement and the question across the House will reinforce once again that reform with their pro-Putin approach would have absolutely no role in bringing allies together on important issues across the globe. Mr. Speaker, she asks about the coalition of the willing. 9 months ago, President Macron and I brought the coalition of the willing together. There are now 36 like-minded countries that meet and discuss frequently and align our positions and our support. That is a considerable achievement, and we have plans in relation to security guarantees, in relation to air, sea and land. Mr. Speaker, on the text of the agreement that's being worked on in Geneva, there was an intensive discussion about this, as she would have expected at the G20, involving a number of key allies, both the E3 plus key coalition of willing allies, and the strong consensus was that we should work with the text that's in existence, unacceptable although some parts of it are, because other parts are essential, rather than a different text, and that is the process that's going on in Geneva, and I think that's the right approach. On defence spending, I've made my position clear, and it goes with the strategic review of defence as well as to how we take that forward. The safe negotiations are going on with the EU in the usual way, and one of the commitments I made in relation to our reset with the EU was that we would do it by quiet diplomacy rather than shouting from megaphones across the channel. On oil and gas, she asks, and this is really important, we are taking every opportunity to have extensive discussions to take Russian oil and gas off the market. This has to be done across Europe. It has to be done beyond Europe. There are discussions I've had beyond Europe on this issue. It is vital that we press ahead, and we are doing so and taking every opportunity. But can I return to where I started? I do genuinely think it's important in this House that we're united on Ukraine. The only winner, if we divide on party political grounds, will be Putin. And I again recognise the work and the lead that the previous government took, which I was proud to support in opposition. I'm proud to take that forward as Prime Minister. I'm grateful for the support that we're getting from the opposition.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by complimenting the Prime Minister on his work on the international stage? But ask him, is he aware that yesterday a statement was put out by the 22 chairs of the Foreign Affairs Committees from parliaments from across the whole of Europe? And we made it clear that we are united in the belief that Ukraine's sovereignty is not just vitally important for brave Ukrainians, but it is vital for the continued security of Europe too. And so we are very pleased to hear from the Prime Minister when he assures the House that any plan that is to be agreed will be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, but can he also assure the House there will be nothing about Europe without Europe?
Well, can I thank her for her question, but also reassure her I did see that letter that was put out yesterday. And she's absolutely right that this conflict affects Ukraine and Ukraine's sovereignty, but it also affects the whole of Europe, including the United Kingdom, both in our values and our security, and materially in relation to things like the cost of living and the price of energy. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, nothing about Europe without Europe, nothing about NATO without NATO are key principles that sit behind the work that we're doing.
Daisy Cooper, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I thank the Prime Minister for advance view of his statement. If this is the endgame for Putin's illegal and murderous war, then we have one chance to get it right. One chance to safeguard the future of Ukraine and one chance to safeguard the future of Europe. The stakes could not be higher. Many of us fear that President Trump is gearing up to betray the rights of Ukrainians. Ukrainians who have fought valiantly in the face of war crimes, torture and the abduction of thousands of children. The White House has tried to deny that Trump's original 28-point plan was a Russian wish list, but that is precisely what it was. We Liberal Democrats welcome the statement from the Prime Minister that Ukraine's sovereignty must be maintained. So when the Prime Minister speaks with the Coalition of Willing this afternoon, will he relay that all major parties in this House agree with him in unequivocally ruling out any proposals that limit Ukraine's sovereignty to defend itself now or in the future must be ruled out, including its right to join defence alliances like NATO? Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister also offer his support and that of the Coalition of Willing to join President Zelensky for any future negotiations with President Trump, so President Zelensky doesn't have to suffer the indignity of being bullied by Trump on his own once again, and so that Europe can show a strong and united stand? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is absolutely right to request that Reform UK conducts an investigation into pro-Russian bribes. Can I ask the Prime Minister whether he will also then commission a second Russia report into Russian interference in our democracy? My honourable friend for Bicester and Woodstock has brought forward a bill enabling the unilateral seizure of Russian state assets in the UK. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether in his discussions with G20 partners he has secured any progress on plans to seize those frozen Russian assets, and if not, why not? Mr. Speaker, on Sudan, will the Prime Minister use his role as the penholder for Sudan to take the lead at the United Nations to secure and enforce a countrywide arms embargo? And finally, the Prime Minister did not mention China, despite reports that the Prime Minister met with the Chinese Premier at the G20. The apparent imminent approval of Chinese super embassy would be a moment of shame for this government. So will the Prime Minister block this application and summon the Chinese ambassador to make clear that we will not accept Beijing's efforts to spy on our parliament, nor will we accept their efforts to intimidate and harass Hong Kongers in our communities?
Well, can I start by thanking her for her support in relation to Ukraine support, which is important, and certainly I'll make a point this afternoon at the Coalition of Willing of expressing how united this House is in relation to the key principles. In relation to her point about President Zelensky, we are, I think, the closest ally of Ukraine in terms of respected and trusted. And that is why not only have I spoken intensively and extensively to President Zelensky over many months and years, but in particular over the last few days, a number of times, sometimes a day, including this morning, in order to do what we can to guide this into the right place. In relation to reform, I completely agree with her comments. It is extraordinary that in this chamber we're having a debate about a war which Russia has perpetrated on Ukraine, and a senior member of Reform is convicted of pro-Russian bribes. In relation to interference with democracy, it is of deep concern. On the assets, look, we are having extensive discussions about this, including at the G20 and elsewhere, in relation to what more can be done, and making progress. It's not straightforward, as she will know, but it is the subject of very extensive discussions to see what more we can do. And in relation to, well, firstly, the Chinese Premier, let me just be clear. I said hello and shook the hand of the Chinese Premier at the G20. We're in the Leaders' Lounge together, and it would have been a little bizarre and discourteous not to have done so, but we didn't actually engage in any substantive discussion. She raises the question of the embassy. That's obviously a quasi-judicial decision that will be taken in accordance with those processes.
John Majusi Desi, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you very much. I welcome the Prime Minister's update statement to the House, but, Mr. Speaker, let's be under no illusion. President Trump's originally proposed peace plan is humiliating and unpalatable to the